You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashel and Edge.
Hey, welcome back, Loy. I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks.
Hello, Jack. Yes, nice to have you around.
And, when I hear from, when we had a 2-week absence from our show because of vacation things. You
mean you tricked me? You put shows in the can?
I did that.
And then you released them while you were gone so that we didn't even know you were gone.
I mean, that was a part of my planning. However, we did miss a week. And so people would say to me, Jack, these are my friends, when are you coming back? We really miss Loy. Okay, guys, thanks. I appreciate that.
Oh, man.
But I take.
They've just had so many years of you. They're done.
They're sick of me. They've heard all my stories. But I take some credit for having selected you out of the thousands of people who auditioned for this job.
You had Ed McMahon stacked up like cordwood out there, just dying to be second banana to Jack Cashel.
Would be Ed McMahon's, would be, who are the guys who played that role? Jack LaScooley, going back. Remember Jack LaScooley?
No. Arthur Treacher.
Yeah. Was that Arthur Godfrey?
No, Arthur Treacher was Merv Griffith's.
Griffin, okay, yeah.
Merv Griffin's number 2.
But they all had sidekicks,
Oh, yeah, Durward Kirby.
Right. Now, no one's accused you of being my sidekick.
Well, not on a public forum.
Anyhow, it might be.
There was that night at Buddy's.
Or at Sidekicks, which is interesting.
Was that the one we were at? I couldn't remember. I get the two confused.
It is called Sidekicks, if I remember right, isn't it?
Buddy's is the one down the street.
Yeah, right. And they do perform the same service for a certain select clientele. We won't go into that. We'll talk about that next hour.
No,
but anyhow, I've been traveling. And I drove across the country about a month or so ago. This is in late June. And I stay off I-70 altogether. I can drive from here to New York without going on either I-70 or I-80, and without costing me more than a half hour for that total trip.
Really?
Yeah, and the first secret is, if you're leaving from Kansas City and those people are coming east or west, is State Highway 36 across northern Missouri, which is straight shot from Cameron to Hannibal without, it's divided highway. There's almost no traffic.
There are very few states that top driving through central Missouri. That is really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And it's very pretty. And, if it's an election year, there's like 10 Trump signs for every Biden sign for those people who care about that thing. And then my stop, though, is in Hannibal, which is ancestral home of, Mark Twain and these characters. So I stop at the Becky.
And nothing else that anybody has ever known about.
And nothing else.
They always go Mark Twain and then whatever other shit happens.
And now the problem is for towns like Hannibal is since young children are not allowed to read about Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, their market is going away. So grandparents are going to say to their kids, because parents probably don't even know either, hey, let's go visit Hannibal. That's where Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer are from. And he'll say, who are those people? I don't know who they are. And I stop at the Becky Thatcher Diner every time. Now, there cannot be another Becky Thatcher Diner in America. But the beauty of it is, and what endeared me so to Hannibal, why I make it part of my biannual trip, is that in 2020, in the spring of 2020, COVID didn't exist there.
They just
ignored it.
Failed to
just totally ignored
it.
They failed to notice. It's such an out-of-the-way place that COVID neglected to arrive there, and the citizens did not panic, right? So I go into the diner in spring of 2020, no one's wearing a mask, even the help, which is kind of great. And then walking around town, the signs would say, masks optional. And at places that were like tourist places where you could buy bric-a-brac. So anyhow, that was my...
People don't realize this, but it was that way, we would escape, buddies of mine and I would escape to Richmond, Missouri to play golf over at Shirky's. Small town, just outside of Kansas City, enough to be
sane,
rural,
right.
you know.
Yeah, right.
Definitely not semi-rural. You're in the sticks, and it's sane, So you go to the golf course, and this is at the height of the beginning of this.
Right,
when they actually had little things stuck in the golf holes.
Oh, right.
So that the ball wouldn't go in the hole because you might touch it and somebody else might have touched it.
Right.
And I mean, that's so crazy. No, it was 2 years ago.
Right?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
And the playground equipment was sealed with police tape, caution tape.
So, but in Richmond, we'd go there, and bottles of water would be sitting in a tub on ice.
Yeah.
And be like, help yourself to the water over there. Everybody just grabbing, reaching in there and putting it on their cart. And I mean, everywhere else, it was like everybody had rubber gloves and masks on.
Right. And it made me proud to be, living in Missouri. I like the, we've talked about
like
this,
the
Memorial Day pool party in the Ozarks, which freaked the rest of America out. I've been bragging about it. So, oh man, these are my peeps. But driving across, what I noticed this time, and basically the thesis of my understanding was there's climate change occurring in America every month, right?
Right.
So I'm driving through, and I'm very drought sensitive. I don't like drought. So I'm driving through, and it was the day I left, it was in the 90s. It promised to be hot and dry. It can rain in Kansas City about 2 weeks. All through Missouri, into Illinois, it's all dry, and the corn is hanging on for dear life, and the soybeans are struggling to get up, and then I get to Indiana, stay overnight at West Lafayette for sentimental reasons. That's where I went to graduate, spent 5 years there, and then the next morning I wake up. This is in late June, and the air is thick and brown and smelly.
Really?
It's the Canadian wildfires, right? Justin Trudeau and his Royal Canadian Mountebanks have set these fires and let them drift our way just to punish us for donating to the truckers during the truck strike.
That's right.
And it was tangible. You could smell it. You go inside it, the smell followed you. All the way across Ohio, same thing. I had to keep wiping my windshield thinking there was
the smell of war. Those were set on purpose.
I suspect they were. And but it was odd how little we official Washington protested that, right? Mm-hmm. And then, I'm back east for about a month, and I'm looking at the temperatures I'm not looking at, I'm hearing about the rumbles of how hot it is, how dry, how people are dying in the streets and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not paying much attention because where I am in New York State, the high this summer has been 85. So, and I would post pictures on Facebook saying, hi today, highest of the summer, 85, Facebook, as you know, is a place to make people feel envious and bad about their lot in life. Mm-hmm. It has no greater purpose.
No.
And your golf shots, I think, are a testament to that.
It's where you go to rub people's noses and the fact that they don't have as much leisure time as you do.
That's right, or they're not leading as good and active a life as you. Mm-hmm. So I decide to come back. I have to come back to do some things, Kansas City, to do the show. And so I head out. I wait a couple of days because it does look like it's going to be like 99, 100 degrees. And I'm coming into, I stop in Indiana overnight. I drive across 30 in Ohio, by the way, is like 36 in Missouri. It's incredible that no one knows about this. Divided all the way across the state.
Is it just because people got into the habit of the bigger
That's right,
interstates?
70 and 80.
It's just a mindless deal with the what do they call the automatic speed and
cruise control
and all that.
It's mental cruise control.
It's just now such a deal that people just automatically go to the giant interstate.
That's right.
Plug in,
in fact,
they miss everything.
Right. There is I would say. I'm going to make a political thing too, is that liberals, from my experience, are more inclined to stick to what they're told to take, right?
Zero-sum thinking.
Right. So I tell people back in New York State, I'd say, hey, if you're driving west of Kansas City, forget about 70. You can take 30 all the way across Ohio. Then you can pick up a couple interstates that no one takes across Illinois, and then you take 36 across Missouri, and you barely see a truck along the way.
But you're talking to people who follow recipes verbatim.
That's right. And it was, oh, no.
They don't want to deal with those
yeah.
complications because they are they're parsimonious.
That's right.
Give me the simplest, mindless way to jack into getting from A to Z.
They tell me I should take I-70. I will take I-70. I said to them, listen, you miss Columbus, you miss Staten, you miss Indianapolis, which is a mess, you miss St. Louis, and you miss eastern Kansas City, eastern Jackson County. You miss all of that. Well, no, we're going to take I-70. Okay. Well, this year, here's what I discovered on the way back. So I cross Ohio. Ohio looked good even a month ago. So I'm crossing Ohio, get to Indiana again, get up the next morning, get up early, head out on the road. It's out of West Lafayette, where I was staying. It's a half hour just on country roads, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is so rich, so green, so verdant, so beautiful, and so productive. I mean, you see these seas of corn and soybeans that come right down to the road on these county roads, and you're thinking there's a handful of people here who are producing more than every client scientist in America put together. And it's just, it's reinvigorating. It's heartening in the heartland. And then I see a sign, this is so pure Indiana. I come to a little town, and the first half hour, there's some stop signs. And it says, it's Wingate is the name of the town. It says, Indiana State basketball champions. I said, that's incredible for a town this big, is one stop sign. And then it looks down and says 1913, 1914, right? That's tradition.
It's been a dry spell.
Speaking of dry spells, of a century. They're never going to win again. I can't imagine the high school has more than like 20 people, But then, again, it was again across Illinois, stop at Hannibal, Becky Thatcher's Diner. And then I get to, I'm wondering, when does this scorched earth, inferno begin? And in northern, eastern Missouri, it's kind of dry looking. I said, okay, now it's really depressing to come into a place where everything's withered and dry. That lasts for about 15 miles. Then I run into a massive squall on the road. And on a road like State Highway 36, you don't even have to worry. You can enjoy it because there's no trucks, you're just all by yourself. Stuff's blowing around, and you're waiting to see like cows come blowing across the road or ladies and witches and bicycles and whatnot. And then I get through the squall, and everything is like Oz. It's incredibly green for late July.
It's so much fun to take those back highway. Now, it is kind of dangerous because with people with their cell phones.
Right.
When you've got oncoming traffic.
Yeah. Right.
That really freaks me out more than ever.
That's a problem.
I almost got killed twice last year. Trucks coming all the way over, right into my lane, driving right toward me. And had I not swerved out of the way at the last second, I would have been. But man, it's so much nicer. I did the same thing. I did a trip to South Central Missouri, and I took the old highways with the towns.
No, and even on 36, which is divided all the way, or 30 across Ohio divided, but they didn't level everything the way they did for the interstate. So you have actual lived life nearby. You can see the life that's lived there.
Now, were there a lot of those horrible propeller?
Very few.
I saw none. I went to Dade County, Missouri to see my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's grave.
Right.
I didn't see any of those on the whole way, which was so nice.
Right.
Because those things are almost like a humiliation ritual.
It is a self-abasement to the gods of climate, to the gods of one world order, and that's the trick. So we are being sold, and you know this way, just a remarkable bill of goods on climate. If reading, just getting the rumbles from the media for the last month back east was like scorched earth, apocalypse.
Every article about every subject must, in the conclusion, include some kind of reference to how this is going to play into the changing globe of the world and climate, blah, blah, blah. Every single article.
And and the media writes this unquestioningly,
Unquestionably.
And so it was such a surprise for me to come back to Kansas, to Missouri. And the state is it's great. It's like it was May. Everything was so fresh and green and wet. And then, of course, I timed it so the temperatures dropped when I got here. I told people I was bringing the good temperatures. Yeah, it's hot in July. I mean, that's a given.
You've seen they've suddenly started all of a sudden acting like they've always read the daily global temperature.
Right.
Like they just start doing that, right?
Yeah.
And they don't say something like, in a ridiculously transparent effort to change everybody's mind about this ridiculous global warming, they just start doing it. And today's global average temperature, 62.8 degrees.
The highest ever.
The highest ever.
Well, I checked.
Women and minorities, hardest hit.
I checked when I got back. So in July in Kansas City, now the average July temperature towards late July is 91, 90 for the whole month.
You mean for the high, the daily
the average high? The average daily high. On two occasions during the month of July, the scorching, hottest ever month of July, it reached 101, and which is 11 degrees above average high. On two occasions, the high was 75, which was 15 degrees below.
Right. And that average. Sounds like a typical July to me.
Typical July. Of the 31 days in July, I say this for the children out there listening who don't know how many days there are in a given month.
They haven't learned the poem yet.
No, they're right. 30 days.
Which
September.
Doesn't rhyme.
April, June, and November. All the rest have 31 except February, which is one day more every 4. Now, there was, of those 31 days, 17, the average high, the high temperature that day was below the average high, which is one indicator. And then I started checking back. And this is I would defy anyone who's near Google or anything to double check what I'm going to tell you. How many days in the previous 10 years, over 100, has Kansas City had? Over 100.
In previous 10 years?
Yeah, we had 2 this year, but in the previous 10 years.
Probably only about 7 or 8.
0. We have had 0 days in that 10-year stretch over 100.
Wow, I knew it. I knew it was rare, but I didn't know it'd gotten that rare. Because I remember when I was a kid, we had the long string of them.
You're right, and it's not just the memories of like exaggerated memories.
We were sleeping on the screened-in porch because a window fan couldn't cool it off enough to even be able to sleep.
Right.
I mean, come on. When's the last time any of these wussies that have been screaming about temperature have had to sleep on a screen-in porch?
Right. And even when
you will be.
Yeah, no, they will.
You will be.
No, I'll hear about it. In 1980, when I had just been here a couple of years, so I'm not really familiar with Kansas City. And I don't know if you remember that summer, but we had 22 consecutive 100-plus days.
I remember we had a streak.
And I remember because I was pitching in a softball league, and the game started at 4 o'clock on Sunday. So I get to the mound on the first Sunday, 4 o'clock. That's probably the highest time of day. And it's 109 degrees. That's not heat island. That's not temperature heat index. It's 109 friggin' real degrees, right?
That's good old American pre-designated hitter degrees.
That's right. That was before the designated hitter. So that's real. We don't have
real
it's
degrees,
not inflated
damn
by. So I go to Colorado the next morning for a week. Wuss that I am, wanting to get out of the heat. And I come back the next Sunday. I drive right from the airport to the field because we have another game at 4 o'clock. Temperature, 109 degrees.
Temperature? 109.
Real temperature, not.
We're talking UMB. Dial that phone number and get that temperature on the phone.
Right.
Degrees.
That's it. Serious degrees. And it was so hot that like a guy who would have hit a home run had to stop at second, take a second base, take a break, like a water break. I forget whether we won or lost, but we survived. That was basically it. I was wearing like one of those little Arab things over my head to keep the heat off my neck. But that was 1980, and that wasn't bad compared to what it's been in the past. Because in 1980, most people had air conditioning. Not everyone, but most people. In 1936...
It was a lot different.
Right, almost no one had air conditioning.
There was no escape.
And there was not. And that summer, Kansas City had 53 days over 100 degrees.
And you didn't hear all this, and how many people died? How many souls perished in that heat wave?
Probably a lot.
But you don't hear all that, right? I mean, now it's like, it got to 86, 20 people died.
Right.
What?
No, and but 1936 was not the hottest year in American history. That year was 1934, which was even hotter than 36.
You mean all that was that a Dust Bowl year?
They were Dust Bowl years. Because now we have like endless droughts and whatnot, more droughts, more hurricanes, more. We're promised this on a daily basis.
They're always talking about how it's the worst ever. And you look at these pictures of the Dust Bowl and it's like, wow, it sure looks better than that.
And you read accounts of the Dust Bowl. And what happened is there was a drought period, and it wasn't, I guess their agricultural practices probably weren't as good as they should have been or could have been or are now. But it got so bad that they took for these massive clouds. People had to seal their windows shut when it's 110 degrees outside.
Yeah.
Because half of Kansas would come blowing in their window,
Yeah.
And these clouds went all the way to the East Coast. They enveloped cruise ships off the coast. That's how big and awful they were,
Isn't that wild?
Oh, and we got a taste of that this summer in the Northeast anyhow with these Canadian clouds coming in. They weren't quite as bad in terms of dust, but they were tangible. They were fungible. You could feel them, and you want to take a shower when you walk through them. They follow you. The smell follows you.
Those were
indoors.
like Antifa clouds.
Yeah, that's it. That's the beginning of the uprising. We'll start by burning your forest.
Those were all started.
Yeah.
Or either that or they just happened to spontaneously combust exactly same time all over the place.
No, I am. No one seems to be eager to find out why they started.
No, they don't.
And our media seem particularly indifferent, at least to me, to the effect of it on people and the cost of it.
Yeah, strange stuff up there going on in Canada.
Yeah.
And that strapping young Castro lad, I guess he's getting divorced.
Young Fidelito?
Yeah.
Is he getting divorced?
I guess he got served.
Huh.
Yeah.
Can't imagine why.
Breaking that thing up.
He's such a handsome young lad.
He is handsome.
and presumably heterosexual.
Yeah, right.
But I've always figured people who are better looking than I am had to be gay. So that's my theory, which means there's an awful lot of gay people in America.
Well, I agree with you, though, Jack. If it does, it's just that. What are you going to do? I mean, that guy. Look at who his parents were.
Right.
Margaret,
who was crazy.
Margaret was nuts.
Right.
And Fidel.
Yeah.
And even if that other guy was the one,
Pierre,
he was no better.
Right. He was like Pepe.
I think I'd rather have Fidel as a father.
It's like having Pepe Le Pew run your government.
Yeah.
Pierre Trudeau. No, they were caught up in the spirit of the time, especially Margaret, who was a big, rock and roller, hanging out with the Rolling Stones and all that stuff. And she was young and hot, relatively speaking, compared to, say, Mamie Eisenhower.
Didn't she do a penthouse photo?
Inevitably, I think. But I think that was after she was thrown out of the French Maison Blanche, or whatever they call it there, the White House, for those who don't speak French. No, they were And it's, I wonder, and Canada, of course, all the countries of Western Europe are totally in on the same scam.
It looks that way, doesn't it?
And it's worse.
They all go in the same direction, same time.
And there's pushback everywhere now.
Yep.
Major pushback in Great Britain, serious pushback in the Netherlands, where they're taking people's farms for who knows what reason, some climate-related reasons. And then in Ireland, when I was there last summer, where the average high was about 65 and rainy, which is typical summer weather in Ireland, it was the lead story almost every day.
Yeah, they're really using it as quite a cudgel. And it goes back, we had one show where we talked about this Gaianism.
Right.
It's that weird. It is a religious thing. And we need to talk about the shaming that's going on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll do a show on that in a future week. Mm-hmm. Starting like a half hour. But
yeah. You guys are just like the government messing with my mind. I never know when these shows are being taped, whether they're real or whether they're. I could be watching a show that's next week's for all I know.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I've been doing a lot of media for my new book, by the way. I just happen to have a copy of this here.
That's that Untenable
book, right? The true story of white ethnic flight from America's cities. And I've done a lot of podcasts, with a lot of people who do what we do.
Yeah.
They don't do it as well.
No, they don't even stack up.
No.
They suck.
We need to be discovered.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We probably got some big shots out there watching us right now.
Yeah.
People loaded.
And probably not people in the windmill industry or the solar panel industry. There's, I did a story a couple of years ago. You wonder how it is that like a certain area ends up with this incredible field of windmills. Right?
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
It is. It totally destroys the landscape.
It's just the most destructive thing.
Yeah. So I checked out this one in west Missouri, around St. Joe, in that area, actually east of St. Joe. And the way they work is really pretty diabolical. So let's say they average you, whoever contracts out with some firm to put in these they're factories. Each one of them is a major industrial plant. And they're, 100 feet high. They have blades as long as a boxcar. You see them being transported. And what they did, first of all, they find some relatively destitute farmer and they'll say,
"Yep,
hey, we're going to pay you.
Yep,
we put this on your land." Now, the neighbors don't really get a say in it. The neighbors whose evening sunlight will be forever turned into a strobe, which probably causes strokes and whatnot, don't get a say. And so how do they get the town's approval? And what they did in this case, very specifically, and they probably do it elsewhere, is they go to the school district, which is the most
whorish.
Whorish. You jumped. I was going to say the most communal part of town, but whorish kind of works, Yeah, I can always trust you to find just the right word at the right time. And yeah, they're whorish. So they promised them all the students get laptops. This is what they did, right? They'll give them all laptops. Yeah. And there's who knows what the super gets under the table, but it's. And then so they all go home with little notes for the parents. Hey, look what wonderful things are coming, and we're saving the planet at the same time. So you get strokes, so that every night all you hear is ooh, ooh, not loud,
no,
ooh, and it's just like the Canadian smoke. It's not. The smell wasn't horrible, but it was always there. Follows you indoors, And people who live near these monstrosities are condemned to deal with it.
They're probably getting sick.
Yeah.
From sounds, and who knows what that shit does to you on what level, and how many birds are getting clobbered. In California, they call them condor cuisinards. That part is
indisputable.
But you go by those things and you look at them, and a lot of times those things aren't turning, right?
That's right. A lot of times.
And
a lot of them are broken.
I saw a field of them. I forget where I was driving. It wasn't that long ago. It was outside of Kansas City. And I saw a giant field of them, and this whole segment of them was not moving.
Right.
And in front of them was this little pump, this little oil derrick, this little pump going. I took a little video of that. Dead giant monoliths not moving.
Right. No,
but yeah, they're horrible, and you can't do anything with them. They can't be recycled. They've got to bury these things. It's just like they're so ugly, so hideous. And you take those 8G cell towers or whatever they are now.
Right.
That just, could you make anything that looks more diabolical than that?
Right.
It's like, well, so what we want to make it look like, well, can we make it look more jaggedy? It's not quite jaggedy enough up there. Well, we've got the devil's horns. Could we make those more, I don't know, angry?
It's like the Watts Tower.
Yeah,
that,
it
right?
is. Yeah, it's like the Watts Tower.
Yeah.
It's like that poor unfortunate Lutheran church over there off of Alt 69, where it looks like they couldn't quite get the the steeple up onto the church, and they just gave up and made it like sideways. A cell tower. Right. But
no, and if even we're working on the presumption, even if there were a real climate crisis, which there isn't, so start with that.
There's not.
This doesn't solve it.
Doesn't.
Not only that, but what it does is it pits, and I like to see this, certain environmental groups against certain other environmental groups. So.
And those little wrecks always happen when you've got all the nothing but grievance organizations together.
Right.
And you're forming a coalition of grievance groups. So you always get these, and they're beautiful when they happen.
When they happen, yeah. When they clash, it's fun to watch because they're
absurd.
They are. It's like the theater of the absurd. It's just comic hijinks. In New Jersey, I know you're following the windmills in New Jersey, which are killing whales, right? And whales, unlike a condor or a robin or whatever, you could just sort of dispose of that. But when a whale washes up on your beach,
it goes, "Oh, ow, you all really hurt me. Oh."
Is that how whales speak?
Yeah, and that nothing gets the pink-haired people upset worse than a whale kind of bemoaning.
Except,
oh no,
in the service of the climate crisis.
Well, that's right, but which one's worse?
Whales are going to have to die,
Well, you got to break a few eggs, right?
To make an omelet, as Mr. Stalin told us.
That's right.
I remember I was visiting friends in the Bay of in the San Francisco Bay Area about 10 years ago. And back when you could still visit the Bay Area without a snap crap to navigate your way around the streets. And I said to them, they said, what would you like to see? They lived in Berkeley. I said, show me something that I'm not going to see in Kansas City, right? So we drove to the Ocean Beach in San Francisco. I don't know if you've ever been there, but their beaches are really forlorn on that ocean side because they're always shrouded in fog. So in the fog is really pretty oppressive. And lying on the beach is the thing that's the big attraction that week in San Francisco. So it reminds me of the setup for a Paul Lynde joke, but I won't go there. It's a dead whale, right? A big old dead whale, right? And you know what whales do when they die?
They get gaseous.
They smell, right? They're terrible smell.
They create gas.
They do. But it had a big crowd. People wanted to see, because the whale was like Moby Dick. I mean, it's just major whale, and there it was. And but that was not. So with a dead whale, then environmentalists get excited about some industry they could blame for killing it. But when that industry is one of their own pet industries, like the windmill industry, they're really at a loss to know whom to blame. So they start pointing fingers at each other. And that's when the fun begins.
Oh, yeah.
And it's crazy. If you had to describe who you think or what entity you think is truly behind global alarmism, who would you point to?
Well, I think it goes back to the Rothschilds.
They were into what, windmills, or Moulin de Vence or whatever?
I just think it all goes back to that whole, the necessity of swaying gigantic groups of community,
right?
Community versus individual. And this is also, I would also put it on Bernays and all those
the propaganda,
the propaganda school,
right?
But it's the same thing that's been going on since day one.
Sort of mass formation psychosis, as they call it.
That's a mass formation psychosis. They're still starting a war, watching how the war goes, and running home with the media and crying that it's going the other way and selling everything short and then buying it all up. That's what's going on still today.
And you know how the Rothschilds...
That's the Rothschild trick.
Well, in fact, you got to give them credit for that one.
Well, that started it all, right. And it's never stopped.
Well, what happened...
They're on a roll.
This is a true story. They had... the original Rothschild was a banker to the Duke or whatever of Germany, of a particular...
Prussia or something,
one of those
or
places.
Sanks.
Right, right. Germany wasn't united then. It was...
Tsar,
and he had 20 children, most of them whom survived, and he had 5 sons who were with it enough to get into the business, and they ended up becoming the heads of the central or the major banking industries in Spain, Italy, Germany,
design.
England.
A total designer. I mean, the guy mapped it out.
Yep.
And he said, I'm going to send my sons to run all the banks of the principalities of Europe.
But they made their killing at the Waterloo.
Yeah.
And what they did is they had mastered the art of communicating through pigeons.
Right.
So with the bonds, the value of the bonds in England were going to vary dramatically based on whether this was a win or a loss. And so they got in quickly and before everyone else did, and they bought up the bonds at low cost and sold them high, and the rest is history. So
I think this racket, this same routine applies to all these made up, these don't let a tragedy go to waste,
right.
Don't let a crisis go to waste.
Right.
This is the same Hegelian dialectic that goes on and on and on. And they use the media to generate all the urgency and all the panic, and they use false these false authority voices, the 52 authorities who said that this happened when the other thing happened. And so
97%.
Yeah.
That's their number. I'd like to meet the other 3%. Those are some brave stand-up guys, you know.
It's just like that fifth dentist. He wants his patients to chew gum with sugar in it. I want to meet that guy.
I'm going to the dentist tomorrow. Maybe I'll put in a word for you. But
is it true that Colgate or that Crest toothpaste is an effective decay preventative dentifrice when used in a conscientiously applied program of regular oral health?
I don't know. I'll ask them. I'll put in that word. No, they've got the racket going, and they sustain it through obviously constant propaganda. The net result, though, is that their children, to the degree they have children, are go to bed frightened at night from fear of climate, right?
Yeah.
And yet, I was reading a book. It was like my beach book for the last month. It was by Ken Follett, who's a British novelist who's very talented, very good at what he does. Written, a lot of books I've read. They're, kind of junk fiction, but they're very well done. And he's very good researcher. He does a lot of research. This book was about, I forget the name of it, but it was about an eco-terrorist group operating in the West, and roughly, I think the book came out in 1990 sometime, right? Mm-hmm. And you're an eco-terrorist group just 30 years ago. And the phrase climate and warming are not in the book.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a new deal.
Right. They weren't, in other words, the apparatus was there ready to find something
Right.
to latch onto. But as late as 1990-something, they hadn't discovered global warming yet. And then, of course, they had abandoned global warming because it stopped warming.
They found out about the coming ice age. And
So then they switched to climate change. That way they get you coming and going.
Yeah.
That way they could account now for hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts,
But
whatever.
you're right. They got little kids scared crapless about all this stuff.
Yeah.
But they always do, and they don't care. They did that on
COVID.
They did that on, what was the other existential thing we had before the climate change?
Oh, well, they had nuclear winter was one of them.
Nuclear, okay.
And
they
that was
had
bogus.
kids hiding under desks.
Yeah, right.
You remember that?
Well, in fact,
and I mean, how legitimate was that?
The one in 1983 was, I mean, you could trace the origins of that. With climate, it's a little, I'm not sure where exactly it generated, but in the big nuclear scare of, I believe it was 1983 or 1982, 83, it came out of the KGB through their front organizations in Scandinavia. They'd have giant nuclear marches and protests and everything. Barack Obama got involved here. We had a big rally in New York City with hundreds of thousands of people. And it was all geared towards one thing, to prevent the United States from deploying, was it Pershing missiles in West Germany. And Reagan went ahead and said, "The hell with you guys, I'm doing it anyhow." And then when he put them in there, the whole movement went away, right? They made this one movie, you remember this? It was set in Lawrence. Was it The Day After?
The Day After, yeah.
Were you in that movie?
I was not.
You were too
I
young.
remember it, though.
Yeah.
I think I was about 16 when that movie
Yeah,
came
that's
out.
probably about right. It was out in the mid-'80s, right? And by the time the movie came out, the movement had passed it by. So it had moved, it had gone from its, from the good cause to movement to business to racket phase. It had already turned into a racket and then it went away.
Hey, they don't call it a movement for nothing, right?
That's right. In fact, Barack Obama, wrote his first big essay published in 1983 on the whole nuclear freeze movement. He was, of course, a big advocate because he was told to be, or not having someone officially channel him, but the vibes in his atmosphere were telling him, you have to be part of this. And it's so spectacularly poorly written that it launched my own inquiry into Barack Obama's literary talents, which are negligible.
I consider Barack Obama a one-man movement, by the way.
Okay. I know it happened some time ago. The paddleboard. I mean, as of this date, it hasn't been solved yet. I need your insight into that one.
The paddleboard?
The guy, the paddleboarding chef.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to have a theory here, because otherwise.
Well, I tell you what, I didn't think about that one.
Yeah.
I thought I'm gonna have to defer to whoever knows anything about any of this creepy, weird stuff that's going on in that house. I mean,
that
Jack, another murder.
Yeah. Well,
it looks like.
I mean, he was
He's bashing a big bash in his head, apparently.
And he's a good swimmer, and a paddleboarder, and 8 feet of water, and it's not ocean, it's a pond, right in front of the Obama's house, and.
But I guess unless he fell on his board and on his head.
But no, he was struggling. They saw some eyewitness saw him struggling. Who that eyewitness was?
See, I didn't follow this one. It was just too crazy.
I haven't gotten into it. I need to. I have a friend who.
It did remind me a lot of that story we were talking about a few weeks ago, though, with the choir director guy.
Oh, right.
It made me think of that right away.
That's right. Me too. That was my first instinct. But I do have, in getting back to our environmental stuff, I have a friend who lives on Martha's Vineyard, who is like one of the 12 right-wingers on the entire island. And he keeps me apprised of events, Shea Obama. And the one it was a good one last year was Obama had to get a special permit from the, Martha's Vineyard dispensary or whatever, to put in a 5,000-gallon propane tank on his property. So what he's a prepper. He's a prepper. That's what I thought. He knows something we don't know. Well, certainly not global warming because you got a $12 million oceanfront mansion, that you just bought. Also, you have an $8 million Hawaiian oceanfront mansion, which you just bought, And then there's John Kerry saying, no, it was his wife's private plane, not his, He marries these women to have private planes. It's
We do have a private plane. Well, yes, it is my wife. Yes, we're related.
Sometimes. It seems that way. I mean, he has a head that looks like it came out of Easter Island, and he's modified it now with
Why the long face?
But with all the plastic surgery now, it's beginning to really look like an Eastern Island head.
It is
sculpted by some native tribesman.
It is. He looks like Mr. Ed.
But anyhow, we will take up the shaming that comes out of these phenomena, not just climate, but other progressive incursions into fantasy world that we have to live with the consequences, of which we have to live with the consequences. But we'll do that on next episode of Upstream. By the way, this is brought to you. We're home to, I should say, Real Media, which is
great. Media, great. You know what, Jack? If you've got a small business and you want to up your game on your social media, I was just looking the other day, a bank friend of mine.
Yeah.
And when they do social media posting, they might go to some charity event and they show this snapshot of 5 or 6 of their employees. And they're looking kind of frumpy and they're in a red sweatshirt and they're like ran in the race and they're all doing the horns behind the head. Don't do that. Call Real Media, get some help, do some professional level stuff for your company's media, social media. You'll be so glad you did.
Yeah, no.
Then people will share it and use it, and you'll actually get some mileage out of it.
And they'll say, you guys are pretty professional. And while you're driving there, you could take out...
That's the Untenable book.
Right, that's right.
By Jack Cashill.
Now available, and previously I've been saying, pre-order, but it's now available on all formats, audio.
It's the true story of white flight.
From true story of white ethnic flight from America's cities.
Okay.
And it's a large part of the memoir, so... It's getting wonderful reviews. I'm really
It is. It's getting great reviews.
Now I just need to sell some books because at the end of the day,
it's all about the money.
We're all salesmen.
Oh yeah, we're all salesmen.
You, me, and Brad, and everyone else here.
And I'm tired of getting the knife set. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we'll move on from that, but we'll move on next week here on. Where are we?
Upstream with Cashill and Edge.